Hello everybody, my name is Miss Neild and I am an English teacher and the PSHE lead here at Ormiston Horizon Academy. Today I will be reading chapter 4 of Stormbreaker for you. If you can make sure that you've got your books ready and that you're ready with your workbook afterwards. I will only be reading half of the chapter today and my good friend Mrs Butler will take over and read the other half for you. So, what do you say? Alex opened his eyes. So he was still alive? That was a nice surprise. He was lying on a bed in a large, comfortable room. The bed was modern, but the room was old, with beams running across the ceiling. A stone fireplace and narrow windows in an ornate wooden frame. He had seen rooms like this in books when he was studying Shakespeare. He would have said that the building was Elizabethan. It had to be somewhere in the country. There was no sound of traffic. Outside he could see trees. Someone had undressed him. His school uniform was gone. Instead, he was wearing loose pyjamas, silk from the feel of them. From the light outside, he would have guessed it was mid-morning. He found his watch lying on the table beside the bed, and he reached out for it. The time was 12 o'clock. It had been around 4:30 when he had been shot with what must have been a drugged dart. He had lost a whole night and half a day. There was a bathroom leading off from the bedroom, bright white tiles and a huge shower behind a cylinder of glass and chrome. Alex stripped off the pyjamas and stood for 5 minutes under a jet of steaming water. He felt better after that. He went back into the bedroom and opened the closet. Someone had been to his home in Chelsea. All his clothes were here, neatly hung up. He wondered what Crawley had told Lack. Presumably, he would have made up some story to explain Alex's sudden disappearance. He took out a pair of Gap combat trousers, Nike sweatshirt and sneakers, got dressed, then sat on the bed and waited. About 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. A young Asian woman in a nurse's uniform came in, beaming. "Oh, you're awake and dressed. How are you feeling? Not too groggy, I hope. Please come this way, Mr. Blunt is expecting you for lunch." Alex hadn't spoken a word to her. He followed her out of the room, along a corridor and down a flight of stairs. The house was indeed Elizabethan, with wooden panels along the corridors, ornate chandeliers, and oil paintings of old bearded men in tunics and ruffs. The stairs led down into a tall, galleried room, with a rug spread out over flagstones, and a fireplace big enough to park a car in. A long, polished wooden table had been set for 3. Alan Blunt and a dark, rather masculine woman sucking a peppermint were already sitting down. Mrs. Blunt? Alex. Blunt smiled briefly, as if it was something he didn't enjoy doing. It's good of you to join us. Alex sat down. You didn't give me a lot of choice. Yes, I don't quite know what Crawley was thinking of, having you shot like that. But I suppose it was the easiest way. May I introduce my colleague, Mrs. Jones? The woman nodded at Alex. Her eyes seemed to examine him minutely, but she said nothing. Who are you? Alex asked. What do you want with me? I'm sure you have a great many questions. But first, let's eat. Blunt must have pressed a hidden button, or else he was being overheard. For at that precise moment a door opened, and a waiter in white jacket and black trousers appeared carrying 3 plates. I hope you like meat, Blunt continued. Today it's carré de gnu. You mean roast lamb? The chef is French. Alex waited until the food had been served. Blunt and Mrs. Jones drank red wine. He stuck to water. Finally, Blunt began. As I'm sure you've gathered, he said, the Royal and General is not a bank. In fact, it doesn't exist. It's nothing more than a cover. And it follows, of course, that your uncle had nothing to do with banking. He worked for me. My name, as I told you at the funeral, is Blunt. I am the Chief Executive of the Special Operations Division of MI6, and your uncle was, for want of a better word, a spy. Alex couldn't help smiling. You mean like James Bond? Similar, although we don't go for numbers, 00 and all the rest of it. Your uncle was a field agent, highly trained and very courageous. He successfully completed assignments in Iran, Washington, Hong Kong and Havana, to name a few. I imagine this must come as a bit of a shock for you. Alex thought about the dead man, what he had known of him, his privacy, his long absences abroad, and the times he had come home injured, a bandaged arm one time, a bruised face another. Little accidents, Alex had been told, but now it all made sense. I'm not shocked, he said. Blunt cut a neat slice of his meat. Ian Ryder's luck ran out on his last mission, he went on. He had been working undercover here in England, in Cornwall, and was driving back to London to make a report when he was killed. You saw his car at the yard. Stryker and Son, Alex muttered. Who are they? Just people we use. We have budget restraints. We have to contract some of our work out. We hired them to clean things up. Mrs. Jones here is our head of operations. It was she who gave your uncle his last assignment. We're very sorry to have lost him, Alex. The woman spoke for the first time. She didn't sound very sorry at all. Do you know who killed him? Yes. Are you going to tell me? No, not now. Why not? Because you don't need to know. Not at this stage. All right. Alex considered what he did know. My uncle was a spy. Thanks to you, he's dead. I found out too much, so you knocked me out and brought me here. Where am I, by the way? This is one of our training centres, Mrs. Jones said. You've brought me here because you don't want me to tell anyone what I know. Is that what this is all about? Because if it is, I'll sign the Official Secrets Act or whatever it is you want me to do, but then I'd like to go home. This is all crazy anyway, and I've had enough. I'm out of here. Blunt coughed quietly. It's not quite as easy as that, he said. Why not? It's certainly true that you did draw attention to yourself, both at the junkyard and then at our offices on Liverpool Street. And it's also true that what you know and what I'm about to tell you must go no further. But the fact of the matter is, Alex, that we need your help. My help? Yes, he paused. Have you heard of a man called Herod Sayle? Alex thought for a moment. I've seen his name in the newspapers. He's something to do with computers and he owns racehorses. Doesn't he come from somewhere in Egypt? Yes, from Cairo. Blunt took a sip of wine. Let me tell you his story, Alex. I'm sure you'll find it of interest. Herod Sayle was born in complete poverty in the back streets of Cairo. His father was a failed oral hygienist. His mother took in washing. He had 9 brothers and 4 sisters, all living together in 3 small rooms, along with the family goat. Young Herod never went to school, and he should have ended up unemployed, unable to read or write like the rest of them. But when he was 7, something occurred that changed his life. He was walking down Fez Street, in the middle of Cairo, when he happened to see an upright piano fall out of a 14th-story window. Apparently it was being moved and it somehow overturned. Anyway, there were a couple of English tourists walking along the pavement underneath, and they would have both been crushed, no doubt, about it, except at the last minute Herod threw himself at them and pushed them out of the way. The piano missed them by an inch. Of course the tourists were enormously grateful to the young Egyptian waif, and turned out that they were very rich. they made inquiries about him and discovered how poor he was. The very clothes he was wearing had been passed down by all 9 of his brothers, and so, out of gratitude, they more or less adopted him, flew him out of Cairo and put him into a school over here, where he made astonishing progress. He got excellent exam results, and here's an amazing coincidence. At the age of 15, he actually found himself sitting next to a boy who would grow up to become Prime Minister of Great Britain. Our present Prime Minister, in fact. The 2 of them were at school together. I'll move forward. After school, Sayle went to Cambridge, where he got a degree in economics. He then set out on a career that went from success to success. His own radio station, computer software, and yes, he even found time to buy a string of racehorses, although I believe they seldom win. But what drew him to our attention was his most recent invention, a quite revolutionary computer that he calls the Stormbreaker. Stormbreaker? Alex remembered the file he had found in Ian Ryder's office. Things were beginning to come together. The Stormbreaker is being manufactured by Sayle Enterprises, Mrs. Jones said. There's been a lot of talk about the design. It has a black keyboard and black casing. With a lightning bolt going down the side, Alex said. He'd seen a picture of it in PC Review. It doesn't only look different, Blunt cut in. It's based on a completely new technology. It's something called the round processor. I don't suppose that will mean anything to you. It's an integrated circuit on a sphere of silicon, about 1 millimetre in diameter, Alex said. It's 90% cheaper to produce than an ordinary chip because the whole thing is sealed in, so you don't need to clean rooms for production. Oh, yes, Blunt coughed. I'm surprised you know so much about it. It must be my age, Alex said. Well, Blunt continued, the point is, later today, Sayle Enterprises are going to make a quite remarkable announcement. They're planning to give away tens of thousands of these computers. In fact, it's their intention to ensure that every secondary school in England gets its own Stormbreaker. It's an unparalleled act of generosity. Sayle's way of thanking the country that gave him a home. So, the man's a hero. It would seem so. He wrote to Downing Street a few months ago. My dear Prime Minister, you may remember me from our school days together. For almost 40 years I have lived in England, and I wish to make a gesture, something that will never be forgotten, to express my true feelings towards your country. The letter went on to describe the gift, and was signed, yours humbly, by the man himself. Of course, the whole government was excited. The computers are being assembled at the Sayle plant down in Port Tallion, Cornwall. They'll be shipped across the country at the end of this month, and on April 1st there's to be a special ceremony at the Science Museum in London. The Prime Minister is going to press the button that will bring all of the computers online, the whole lot of them. And this is top secret. By the way, Mr. Sayle is to be rewarded with British citizenship, which is something he has apparently always wanted. Well, I'm very happy for him, Alex said. But you still haven't told me what this has got to do with me.
Hello, I'm Mrs. Butler. I teach Air and Beauty, and I'm going to read for you now my chapter. Blunt glanced at Mrs. Jones, who had finished her meal while he was talking. She unwrapped another peppermint and took over. For some time now, this department, Special Operations, has been concerned about Mr. Sayle. The fact of the matter is, we've been wondering if he isn't too good to be true. I won't go into all the details, Alex, but we've been looking into his business dealings. He has contacts in China and the former Soviet Union, countries that have never been our friends. The government, they think he's a saint, but there's a ruthless side to him too. And the security arrangements at Port Talon worry us. He's more or less formed his own private army. He's acting as if he's got something to hide. Not that anyone will listen to us, Blunt muttered. Exactly. The governments are too keen to get their hands on these computers and listen to us. That was why we decided to send our own man down to the plant, supposedly to check on security, but in fact his job was to keep an eye on Herod Sayle. "You're talking about my uncle," Alex said. Ian Ryder had told him that it was going to be an insurance convention, another lie in a life that has nothing but lies. Yes, he was there for 3 weeks and, like us, he didn't exactly take to Mr. Sayle. In his first reports, he described him as a short-tempered and unpleasant, but at the same time, he had to admit that everything seemed to be fine. Production was on schedule, the stormbreakers were coming off the line, and everybody seemed to be happy. But then we got a message. Ryder couldn't say very much because it was an open line, but he told us that something had happened. He said he'd discovered something, that the stormbreakers must leave the plant and that he was coming up to London at once. He left Port Talon at 4 o'clock. He never got to the freeway. He was ambushed in a quiet country lane. The local police found the car and we arranged it to be brought up here. Alex sat in silence. He could imagine it. The twisting lane with the trees just in blossom, the silver BMW gleaming as it raced past, and around a corner a second car waiting. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "It proves what we were saying," Blunt replied. "We have our doubts, Mr. Sayle, so we're sending a man down, our best man. He finds out something and he ends up dead. Maybe Ryder discovered the truth." "But I don't understand," Alex interrupted. "Sayle is giving away the computers. He is not making..."
"He's not making any money out of them. In return, he's getting a medal and British citizenship." "Fine. What's he got to hide?" "We don't know," Blunt said. "We just don't know. But we want to find out, and soon, before these computers leave the plant." "They're being shipped out on March 31st, Mrs. Jones added. "Only 3 weeks from now." She glanced at Blunt. He nodded. "That's why it's essential for us to send someone else to Port Talon. Someone to continue where your uncle left off." Alex smiled queasily. "I hope you're not looking at me." "We can't just send in another agent," Mrs. Jones said. "The enemy has shown his hand. He's killed Ryder. He'll be expecting a replacement. Somehow, we have to trick him. We have to send someone in who won't be noticed," Blunt continued. "Someone who can look around and report back without being seen. We were considering sending down a woman. She might be able to slip in as a cleaner or a kitchen helper. But then I had a better idea. A few months ago, one of these computer magazines ran a competition. Be the first boy or girl to use the Stormbreaker, travel to Port Talon and meet the Herod Sayle himself. That was the first prize, and it was won by some young chap who's apparently a bit of a whiz kid when it comes to computers. Name of Felix Lester, 14 years old, the same age as yourself. He looks a bit like you too. He's expected down at Port Talon 2 weeks from now." "Wait a minute. You've already shown yourself to be extraordinarily brave and resourceful," Blunt said. "First at Junkyard. That was a karate kick, wasn't it? How long have you been learning karate?" Alex didn't answer, so Blunt went on. "And then there was the little test we arranged for you at the bank. Any boy who would climb out of a 5th floor window just to satisfy his own curiosity has to be rather special. And it seems to me that you are very special indeed. What we're suggesting is that you come and work for us," Mrs. Jones said. "We have enough time to give you some basic training. Not that you'll probably need it, and we can equip you with a few items that may help you with what we have in mind. Then we'll arrange for you to take the place of this other boy. We'll pack him off to Florida or somewhere, give him a holiday as a consolation prize. You'll go to Sayle Enterprise on March 29th. On the March 29th. That's when the Leicester boy is expected. You'll stay there until April 1st, which is the day of the ceremony. The timing couldn't be better. You'll be able to meet Herod Sayle. Keep an eye on him. Tell us what you think. Perhaps you'll also find out what it was that your uncle discovered and why he had to die for it. You shouldn't be in any danger. After all, who would suspect a 14-year-old boy of being a spy? All we're asking you to do is to report back to us, Blunt said. April 1st is just 3 weeks from now. That's all we're asking. 3 weeks of your time. A chance to make sure these computers are everything they're cracked up to be. A chance to serve your country. Blunt had finished his lunch. His plate was completely clean, as if there had ever been any food on it at all. He put down his knife and fork, laying them precisely side by side. All right, Alex, he said. So what do you say? There was a long pause. Alex put down his own knife and fork. He hadn't eaten anything. Blunt was watching with polite interest. Mrs. Jones was unwrapping yet another peppermint, her black eyes seemingly fixed on the twist of paper in his hands. No, Alex said. I'm sorry. It's a dumb idea. I don't want to be a spy. I want to play soccer. Anyway, I have a life of my own. He found it difficult to choose the right words. The whole thing was so preposterous. He almost wanted to laugh. Why don't you ask this Felix Lester to snoop around for you anyway? We don't believe he'd be as resourceful as you, Blunt said. He's probably better at computer games. Alex shook his head. I'm sorry, I'm just not interested. I don't want to get involved. That's a pity, Blunt said. His tone of voice hadn't changed, but there was a heavy, dead quality to the words, and there was something different about him. Throughout the meal he had been polite, not friendly, but at least human. In an instant, that had disappeared. Alex thought of a toilet chain being pulled. The human part of him had just been flushed away. We'd better move on then to discuss your future, he continued. Like it or not, Alex, the Royal and General is now your legal guardian. I thought you said the Royal and General didn't exist. Blunt ignored him. Ian Ryder has, of course, left the house and all his money to you. However, he left it in trust until you were 21, and we control that trust. So there will, I'm afraid, have to be some changes. The American girl who lives with you, Jack, Miss Starbright, her visa has expired. She'll be returned to America. We propose to put the house on the market. Unfortunately, you have no relatives who would be prepared to look after you, so I'm afraid that also means you'll have to leave Brooklyn. You'll be sent to an institution. There's one I know just outside Birmingham, the St. Elizabeth in Sowerbridge. Not a very pleasant place, but I'm afraid there's no alternative. You're blackmailing me, Alex exclaimed. Not at all. But if I agree to do what you ask, Blunt glanced at Miss Jones. Help us and we'll help you. she said. Alex considered, but not for very long. He had no choice, and he knew it. Not when these people controlled his money, his parents, his present life, his entire future. You talked about training, he said. Mrs. Jones nodded. Felix Lester is expected at Port Talbot in 2 weeks, she said. That doesn't give us very much time, but it's also why we brought you here, Alex. This is a training centre. If you agree to what we want, we can start at once. Start at once? Alex spoke the 3 words without liking the sound of them. Blunt and Miss Jones were waiting for his answer. He sighed. Yeah, all right. It doesn't look like I've got much choice. He glanced at the slice of cold lamb on his plate. Dead meat. Suddenly he knew how it felt.